you don't have any clientele leads to pull from, it's going to fail real quick because leads are the lifeblood of any business organization. And then sales are what keep the lights on.
So for someone who's listening to this podcast and wanting to start fitness business, online coaching business,
I've had to learn along the way and fail forward, just like you have in your life, right? You build a company up and you don't do any market research, it's going to fail real quick. You don't have any clientele leads to pull from, it's going to fail real quick because leads are the lifeblood of any business organization.
welcome to the show.
Mark, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Welcome to Peak Performance Perspective, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. I must start out by asking that from the perspective of a strength and conditioning coach and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt, what does peak performance mean to you?
I think let's start off with the physical side, right? It means in being fantastic cardiovascular shape, having your conditioning on point. It means being at a body composition of muscle mass and fat mass that is probably somewhere at or below 13%, right? Just for me personally, as I'm getting to be 30, 31 years old now. And then on top of that, still being strong enough to do everyday tasks day to day, but still pushing for something a little more that's challenging in life. And then on top of that, being able to even take that a step further into the mats, into jiu-jitsu, into strength conditioning, into life. Let's take that and look at, hey, we got to be articulate with our words. You got to be able to perform when you're on air, when you're doing something, when you're writing. If I write something, it's be concise. I'm interviewing, there should be some. Peak performance is not just in the weight room or on the mats, it's in everyday life.
How do you do that in everyday life? How does one not get swayed by just the minutia and the tides of things that are happening?
Traditionally, I think a big portion of that is having some level of variety. So in the weight room, as an example, we're going to change up the lifts every 4 weeks, or we're going to look at different types of conditioning. Hey, instead of being in very anaerobic or alactic, with mainly power in a lot of these phases, we're going to actually go and do more aerobic, maybe some more zone 2 cardio, right? We're going to keep the heart rate a little bit lower. We're going to be able to go for a longer period of time. If you're looking at diet as an example, like we talked about earlier, changing up some of those seasoning on the chicken, it's a very small thing that can help get you to that finish line, whatever peak performance looks like. And then as far as expanding out beyond that, venturing into new stuff, take on a new challenge every year. If you're in jiu-jitsu, go compete. Only 10% of people compete. If you are in writing, because I am as well, challenge yourself. Write a training manual. If you're a coach, write a novel if you're a fictional author, et cetera, et cetera. There should be some kind of mountain to climb.
When I have an expert like you on a call, I usually get called if I don't ask about some of the myths or some of the facts that are out in social media. Because with fitness, there's so much out there. So right off the bat, I want to start out asking about cardio, because you mentioned it's important to do cardio to have a good cardiovascular health. The gurus on the internet will tell you don't need to do cardio. And if you're doing strength training enough, high volume, low weight, that's cardio enough. What's your viewpoint on that?
I would say cardio is not enough if you're just doing strength training. You need a lot of that zone 2 work, and a lot more recent studies from 2020 onward. I'll try and get them for you later on. But essentially, they lay out a foundation of a pyramid, right? At the base of the pyramid is our aerobic fitness. But notice if we have a limited aerobic fitness on the pyramid, we can only go high. And high could be specific to sport, could be your numbers in powerlifting, it could be any performance, maybe even just going to run a marathon, right? But the bigger your base, the higher you can go, if that makes sense. So to sit here and say that, oh, strength training is cardio, like above 10 reps, right? Is it like on the squat, is it here a great example? Well, that's been disproven multiple times. Yes, you'll have an uptake in carbohydrates and glycogen in the muscle. But what we really want to do is when we get to those longer cardiovascular sessions is to dive into your fat metabolism, which can primarily be done in zone 2 cardiovascular work, because that will be the primary focus of them.
For some of us who are into training, we know carbohydrates are the undisputed king of energy. But there's a movement out there which is about being on a carnivore diet. You eat 2 times every 3 days or 3 times every 2 days. You eat nothing but meat. You eat no carbs whatsoever. And they claimed that when you're using fat as a fuel, it's better for performance than using carbs as a fuel. What's your viewpoint on that?
Depends on what the goal is, right? Normally, I don't recommend it, right? And I would recommend anyone who needs dietary advice go see an actual registered dietitian at your local hospital. But if I was to give my 2 cents to it, you need carbohydrates no matter what, especially if you're doing anything with power, sprinting, intermittent sports like basketball, lacrosse, soccer, American football, any of that jazz, right? You're going to need some sort of carbohydrate because eventually you're going to fatigue out, right? And it may not be in the first day. It's going to be when we get to week maybe 6, 7, 8, 9. You're going to start to see a massive decrease in performance if you don't have carbohydrates. Because at the end of the day, you need carbs to perform. They're what give you the glucose and the glycogen that gives you the energy to perform.
Help our audience understand some of the key differences between tactical training for athletes versus traditional sports athlete training?
Yeah, so let's start off with sports athlete training because I think that'll be a better place to start. So when we look at sport, eventually there's an end goal, which is the season. So over the off season, the first couple of weeks, I might build up your aerobic base, your aerobic fitness. We're going to remove some imbalances, maybe work on how good your movement is. Later on, we're going to start making sure we build up some muscle mass in preparation for the specifics we need for your sport season. Then once we build up that muscle mass, we're going to start building strength. And strength predominantly comes from the central nervous system, which is just your brain telling your muscles what to do. So that's why you see some guys in the gym can deadlift 400 pounds, as an example, and they don't look like Ronnie Coleman, right? So just as an example for your audience. Then we're going to go into peaking and looking for the specifics of what we're looking for as we get into the preseason or into the season. And then you get your postseason, which is just keep the guys healthy, let them get to the finish line. So if your goal is to get to the Super Bowl, we want to look at where you're at coming in to the off season from whatever competition phase you just come out of to the early off season, right? Where we're going to remove those imbalances, build up that cardiovascular endurance specific to your sport. And then on top of that, we're going to get you bigger, get you stronger, get you more powerful, peak you for the specifics of competition. When we look at tactical, that can be a variety of different things, right? Whether it's your guys in special operations who are the new guys out of the Q course and they've gone in and they're saying like, hey, I'm the new guy here. I'm a young stud. I want to just not get hurt, stay strong, be able to do the mission. Great. That's what we can do. A lot of the times they want to get their numbers up. They want to get past their physical fitness test, whether you're a firefighter, police officer, special ops, if you're a pilot of some sorts. It's a number of different things we can look at with that. It's all specific to the task. And then on top of that, those people, unless they're in a training pipeline, if they're in an actual squadron of, let's say, firefighters, they're in season 24/7, 365. Really, it's building the qualities we have time to up and making sure you don't get hurt or lose a ton of those other training qualities. For an example, right? We might be able to get you stronger. We may not be able to get you bigger because you don't have time to actually have the appropriate sleep, have the diet, have certain supplements, etc. that we can look at for that. So in the tactical side, we're looking to keep you healthy to perform at a high level any given day of the week. Right? You go into a fire department, if you ever done any ride-alongs, you stay in with them, that bell's going to go off. The tones are going to go off, and they're going to run down the stairs, get in that kit. They're going to be in the fire truck and out the door super fast, as an example, right? You can't prep for that in an off season. You can only do that and keep them healthy throughout the entire year.
With January 1st coming up soon, a lot of people are going to want to go to the gym, get in the best shape they can be in 2025. Can you help them understand the difference in training for hypertrophy, which is bigger muscles, or strength, like you mentioned?
Yeah, so hypertrophy, we are looking for volume, we're looking for load and time under tension, right? That's the physical component of it. However, the big key for hypertrophy is also going to be on the nutrition side and the sleep side. So if you had to rank it, you need to sleep properly first. That's where you're going to get the best growth hormone that's going to allow the muscle to grow. That's where your nervous system is going to recover so it can keep working out. Because you and I both know consistency is key, right? But then we look at the nutrition side. How's your protein intake? What kind of carbs are you eating? Are you going to eat the really bad sugar Pop-Tart on one side, or are you going to go and get a lot of your carbs from vegetables, fruits, whole grains, right? Healthier sources that are going to help fuel you into those workouts. We can then work on the load. We can work on the total volume and time under tension, which could just be 5 sets of 10 all the way to 5 sets of 5, but we're doing 5 seconds on the way down, 3-second hold, 5 seconds up. Just depends on what the goal is. A lot of the times when we're looking at strength, the central nervous system is what we're actually trying to prime. Now, ideally, you want to be big enough to lift a certain weight. Size, in this case, hypertrophy, like you said, doesn't actually play as big of a role in strength as we think. It only plays about 30% of a role, right? So are you big enough to eventually get to lift the weight you want to lift? Right? Because when I go lift 405 on the barbell, if I pick up the barbell and go and it comes up, great, I'm strong enough, but I may not be the biggest I've ever been. Because when we focus on size too much, we're taking away from the strength adaptation. Now, there's a point where we can do both of them together and build up, but eventually you'll have to focus on strength.
What is strength adaptation, and why is focusing on hypertrophy taking away from that?
So strength adaptation is just telling the neuron in the brain to go to the muscle and then tell the muscle to twitch at a certain rate of force to lift the barbell, essentially. Okay. That is strength at its most base core. It's the ability to produce force. Okay. But when we're looking at hypertrophy, we only need a certain amount to get to a certain level of strength. Now, let's say you want to get a little bigger so that way you can increase your strength. We find that you need to put on some weight to probably get to those next level of numbers. If you're a power lifter, strongman, etc., then yeah, we'll probably need to put on 10, 15 pounds of muscle. right? And that will allow yourself to have more dense muscle fibers that will allow that neuron to come in and activate more of those muscles. It's more so for potential than it is to actually get to the ceiling.
You brought up a point about getting your sources from Pop Tarts as opposed to vegetables. The gurus on the internet will tell you as long as you're in your macros, it doesn't matter. So if that's true, and I'm allowed 400 grams of carbs in my macros, why not go for the delicious Pop Tarts? Why stick with rice and fruits and vegetables?
Because you're going to have longer, better sustaining carbs that are going to give you longer sources of fuel during your workouts. I think another thing too, a lot of people think of when they think of the Pop Tart, right? You get the sugar, okay, it's a carb. Yes, academically, it is a carb. It's going to spike you up and then have you come down just as hard. So we're going to spike your glucose up and you're going to have a real drop in energy later in the day. And it's not sustainable for training either. So yeah, if I am really struggling in a lift, I might throw in, let's say, a Gusher or a Skittle, right? It's going to give me a quick burst of glucose, right? But you don't want to use that a ton. You want to use that very sparingly. But if you're going to a physique competition or a bodybuilding competition, you've just thrown a whole bunch of sugar in and messed up your diet for the day.
How does a glucose response affect fat loss?
So when your body has a ton of sugar, you're going to then take all that sugar in, right? And then on top of that sugar, the stuff that is not used in it is going to get converted to fat, essentially. When it gets converted to fat, you're going to have a higher fat mass, and it's just not going to be as optimal for you to go into the weight room. So if you want to keep the fat mass off, you're going to want to stick with those veggies, those fruits, etc., those natural sources of sugar as far as the artificial ones. Does that make sense?
Now, let's about your journey a little bit. What inspired you to dedicate your career to helping others achieve resilience and peak performance?
Yeah, so it starts off in high school for me. I had a strength and conditioning coach, Coach Rooney. If you're listening to this, I hope you get a chance to. But he came into our high school, and the boosters had built up this massive weight, a couple $1 million. We had 24 racks, reverse hypers, barbells, chains, bands, sleds, tires, you name it. And it was offered as a class. Even though I wasn't old enough to take the class, I got in around my sophomore year, and I played basketball. I had sustained a pretty nasty back injury. And to be honest, I was just tall and lanky. I wasn't muscular. So I wasn't as effective on the basketball court as I could be. So I get told to go into the weight room with Coach Rooney during the off season. And every day, 4 days a week, I'm in there training my butt off. And I start to see, hey, I'm jumping higher. I'm running faster. I'm not in pain anymore. My back is no longer fired up whenever I stand up or sit down, right, from the injury that I had. So from there, I went from being the last man on the bench to being the first guy off the bench to sub in the game the next year. So I realized real quick the power of performance and what that means, not only for everyday life and function, like getting up and sitting down, but how to go into a game and perform at the pace and the conditioning and the actual skill set you need to go there and win a basketball game. I will say he also taught me responsibility and ownership. You and I both know most guys, when you get them working out, everything else comes up in their life. They start acting more respect. Their work ethic goes up. My grades went from being C and B to A and B averages. I was closing in on maybe getting a D in one of my math classes. And luckily, he was hard on me. He was the first real masculine figure that said, no, you're going to get your butt in the weight room, you're going to train, and you're not going to fail your classes. And I said, yes, sir, because I didn't know what to say. It was just such a overwhelming sense of energy. So then I decided to follow that path into college. I get my bachelor's in exercise science from Longwood University in Virginia. And then I wind up getting into the master's program at the University of Miami to become a strength conditioning coach with a master's of exercise physiology. Along the way, I've interned at a lot of universities to get the experience to get into grad school. So I was at Longwood, Liberty, VCU, and then eventually I was a graduate assistant with the U in their athletics programs, which allowed me to help send guys to the professionals in baseball, in volleyball for the Olympic trials, in track and field, NFL, basketball, you name it. Truly remarkable experience. Started to get into tactical strength conditioning as the rumors about it in the industry started to come up with fire departments, police departments, military contracts, etc. Right. So I meet a couple guys. They tell me their career path. They convinced me right then and there that this is a better option. And with the way they've laid it out, it made more sense to what I wanted at the time, the meaning and impact that I wanted. So from there, I go off to Detroit, Michigan. I work for Exos, which is the big NFL combine company you see all over ESPN. I also worked with a ton of different people there. We worked with firefighters, general population, college athletes, high school athletes, middle school athletes, local soccer clubs that were there. So I got exposed to a lot of stuff. And then I eventually was able to get in with one of those tactical units and now currently living outside of the United States. Right?
You mentioned that when men start training in the gym, other areas of their life also seem to get better. Why do you think that is?
I think it just provides structure and discipline more than anything. And especially young men need that. I think you and I both know if we're just left to our devices as a 15-year-old man or a child, right? Really, it's a child, it's a teenager. We're going to be pretty self-destructive. We need structure. We need a place to let our rage out if we get angry as a kid, as we're going through those weird teenage years. We need someone who is older than us and more disciplined to show us why that is important. So that's a mentor, a friend, a coach, whoever that may be. And then I had more energy. I was no longer lethargic when I would go to the classroom. I had energy because I was working out. So I wasn't as tired. My body composition was better. My conditioning levels were up. And therefore, I was able to pay better attention in class, get better grades, and then get into university. So I think it all sums up and comes together, but it starts with the physical. But I think especially for men like you and me, we need that mentorship at a young age when we are boys.
You have a very famous motto: if you stay ready, you never have to get ready.
That's right.
How do you apply this philosophy in your coaching and personal life?
Coaching wise, I think have your systems made if you're a strength and conditioning coach. If you're a sports coach, understand what the objective you want to accomplish that day, that month, that quarter, or that year is. If you can apply that, you'll be surprised how much you'll actually get done. It's the same as Alex Herman has a very famous saying where, why do tomorrow what you can do right now? If you can do it, like even like shooting a text to a client, you should text them. Don't let that slip. Do it real quick right now. Done. 2 seconds. Over. And in your personal life, I believe in staying in great shape for my significant other. I also believe in that will translate to other areas of my life, like writing, creativity, more job opportunities, right? It's no surprise that a lot of the CEOs in the world are in great shape. And on top of that, they're an average of what is it, like 6 foot something, whatever, right? But one of those is out of people's control, but one of them is within your control. So you should do what you can to maximize for success every single day. You're not going to be perfect every day. That's fine. But when you go to bed at night, reflect on what I did right, what I did wrong. Did I actually get ready? And could I have executed at the highest level today if I needed to?
When we talk about these things, mental toughness, critical to be able to even apply some of these tactical principles that you're talking about. For someone listening, can you help them understand what are some practical ways to cultivate this mental toughness? And even before that, how do you define mental toughness?
So I think mental toughness, let's start with the definition, right? It is such a loosely defined, like it's hard to truly define or quantitative or put in quantitative state. I like the term resiliency a little bit. If I throw something at you, let's say we're going to get up at 4 a.m. tomorrow. We're going to go for a 5 mile run. Okay, you might be able to do that for one day. Can you do it for 10? Can you do it for 15? What about 20? Can you do it for 20 days? Those are small things that I will see how your resilience will go over time. Will you stay resilient and stay with me? Will you come down a little bit and come back up? Or are you just going to crash and burn after 1 or 2 days? So that's what we should define it as. Now, could you re-ask the question one more time, just so I have the proper verbiage? So we got the definition. What was the next part?
For those who are looking to cultivate it, how do you go about cultivating it?
Start doing something small, hard. It could be small, and I recommend starting small if it's your first time every single day. If you have never gotten outside your house after work and walked a mile, let's start there. That's a very practical step that someone can just start today in their neighborhood, wherever it may be. If you are scared to write and you've never written before and you get the writer's block and it's driving you crazy, write one paragraph and close the laptop. Start there. Now, as you start to develop it and take more pride in it, right, you're going to find that mental resiliency gets easier and easier, right? So you can go through and now instead of writing one paragraph, you're writing 3, or maybe you get in a flow state and suddenly the whole paper's done in an hour and a half, 2 hours. If it's walking, let's turn into jogging. Jogging, let's turn into running. Running, hey, maybe we're going to sprinkle some lifts in. Oh, you know what? I'm not eating good enough. Maybe we could sprinkle in some better dietary components to what I'm trying to do. But it's a matter of starting and just staying consistent. The second you're not consistent and you don't recognize it and get back to it the next day, that's where you're going to see that decline.
What do you say to somebody who says, I understand all of this, I just don't feel motivated enough to do it?
You and I both know that there are days you don't want to go to the gym. There are days I don't want to train. I got to wake up at 07 tomorrow and do deadlifts tomorrow. It's going to be brutal. I know it's going to be brutal. That's part of it. But if you're looking for motivation, you're looking in the wrong setting. Yes, it can spike you up in the interim and get something done for that day, but it's not going to last you because motivation fades, right? It's emotional. It's not necessarily always constant. What is constant is discipline. If you can go through every day, do something. If you can't get in the gym today, do 100 push-ups, right? Can't do 100 push-ups, go for a long 30-minute walk at night with your spouse or walk the dog, something. Maybe we didn't make our bed this morning. Maybe we didn't go and do the run. Maybe we didn't do the lift, but we walked the dog, we saw the wife, we ate properly, and maybe I did 100 push-ups, right? That you still got something out of that day. You didn't just lose the day. So try not to lose days. You're going to fall short sometimes. Get back up on the horse and keep going.
You have written manuals, textbooks in the field of human performance. What gap in the industry are you trying to aim with your work?
I think the first gap is getting coaches to come over from the athletic side, specifically strength and conditioning coaches for your audience, to understand that this side of the field is very different. You may not have all the structure you want. You may not have all the money and resources and equipment. Here are some ways you can actually modify your training programs to still get a good result. So that way, when you go to your leadership, go to your command, go to the chief of your department or whatever that is, you can now have data that backs up why your program is efficient and good for whatever department, unit, whatever. And then you can get those more resources, more time, more money, right? Maybe you need a training course with the guys for 8 weeks if they come out of the academy, as an example. And then on top of that, just overall education. Sometimes people don't understand leadership structures. Sometimes people don't understand, hey, if I piss off that guy, I don't know he's number 3 on the totem pole, but he's best friends with the chief. Ooh, that may not go too well for my program if I'm just starting off my first 30, 60, 90 days. Because those first impressions matter. No matter what unit, what department you're in, you need to understand those. So there is some social components. And there also is an academic component with understanding training, programming, coaching, understanding your personnel, right? Like firefighters are very different from special ops guys. Special ops guys are very different from police. Police are very different from your gen pop, general population people, and bodybuilders and Olympic weightlifters. So understanding that can really play a role as well. And those are the gaps we're trying to fill.
You're a big proponent of failing forward. Can you share a pivotal moment where failing forward shaped your perspective on resilience?
I think failing forward, man, I think a big thing for me was I was training for a powerlifting meet when I was younger. I had been training for 24, 30 weeks, programmed everything out. It was going great. And then about 2 weeks from the meet, I really wound up hurting myself, my low back. And it really pissed me off. I put in all that time, all that effort training just to get hurt and not to be able to go do the darn thing, right? So I had to take a step back and realize, hey, this may not be my moment right now. This is okay. There's still something we can do today, even though we failed a little bit right before, because we maybe had our ego. And my thing was I was ego deadlifting. I'll keep it real with you. Back wound up just shooting out, and that was not good. So I failed. I reassessed the program from there, and I always kept that in the back of my mind going forward. Now, that's just one physical example. Career-wise, I've had a moment where I might have come in a little too hot to a new staff and a new program. I might have been a little too full of myself, let's say. I thought maybe I was God in this scenario and I had all the answers. Turns out I didn't, real quick. And you get humbled by that. And even though I was right in pretty much 95% of the situations that I was in, the way it came across when I was in meetings, when I was with higher ups, maybe with my tone to people, was not the best way it could have been. Until someone comes in and lets you know that, and you readjust course. And guess what? Yeah, you're succeeding, but you could be massively succeeding right here. So those are 2 examples of failing forward, one in the career.
Talking about injuries, what are some of the most common misconceptions about injury prevention in strength training?
Anyone who can tell you, or anyone who tells you they can prevent injuries is lying to you. If I take Ray Lewis for the Baltimore Ravens in his prime and say, hey, we're going to go tackle Mark right now, and you just got to stand there, he's probably going to snap your leg. Just keeping it real with you. But if I say, hey, Mark, we can get you stronger, we can get you more resilient to these injuries, we can decrease the probability you're going to get injured, right? And then if I can take these key players, right, as far as a strength coach goes, make sure they can last the entire season, then I can go to the head coach and say, hey, yes, they only went up 5% instead of the 20% on all the KPIs you wanted, but they played the entire season and we won key games because we kept those 10 key players healthy. So I think those are the big that is the big misconception on injury prevention and strength and conditioning. But I understand why we use the terminology the way we do. But I think we have to look at the semantics of it and actually apply fact to it as well.
Other than obviously listening to your body and not pushing it to a point where it's going to break, how do you balance physical preparedness and mental sharpness in high stakes professions like firefighting or defense, like you mentioned?
I think, honestly, step one should be to get a cognitive performance coach on your staff for any fire departments that are listening. Understanding and visualizing stuff ahead of time is crucial to actually performing the task. So if you looked at John Jones in a lot of his early fights for the UFC, I don't know if you like UFC and MMA, Mark, but he talked about sitting there and saying, no, I visualized this moment for a whole 6 months leading up to this. I knew I was going to knock this guy out. I have practiced this kick 10,000 times, and that's the one I got him. So having that confidence, visualizing it, and then actually doing the work that builds up to it, you're going to see a much higher rate of success. And putting them in stressful situations that are controlled. If you look at some of the training that operators do in special operations, there's a controlled training that goes into it where you're going to push your stress limits to as high as they can go, and you're going to figure out what you're made of. And then we're going to bring you down a little bit and teach you stuff. But we need to know, do you have that tolerance to go up? Some people have a natural acuity to it. Other people like me needed to be thrown into the mix and understand what that is. I can tell you, if you go squat 405 on a barbell, I can tell you what that's going to feel like from a scientific perspective. I can tell you what that unracking position is going to feel like when you take the barbell out of the rack, when you go down and come up. But until you experience it, you really don't have. So the key is to get understanding through experience and honestly failing forward sometimes. I failed my first attempt at 405, and then I wound up hitting it my second time about 5 minutes later.
What is the difference between properly doing visualizations versus just imagining things?
That's a great question. And I really think that it just comes down to going through the motions and understanding the consequences of it and then accepting it, truly accepting it on the inside. So I could say, okay, I'm going to imagine myself knocking out John Jones, which you and I both know I can't do, right? But I could go in, I could train as hard as I can, I could get in the ring with him, but I also accept the fact that he could knock me out at any given moment. And that in turn will allow me to accept it. I'll go into visualizing it, understanding it, and then potentially having the chance to knock him out. Will it happen? Probably not. Just as an example, right? But these are just ways to think about it because some people live in la la land and stay positive all the time. That doesn't work. You need to have a realization, understand the dangers of what you are doing. And I think if you talk to anyone, especially in fire, military, police, the veterans in those fields, the guys that have done it for 15, 20 years, they understand it. So they can teach it better. They can see that young guy going through the training program that they're doing or the qualifications they have to go through, or maybe situational exercises that they do. Say, I made that mistake 10 years ago. I turned that corner too sharply and I got, the consequences that be happened. So when people look at that, you need to understand what that looks like. Right. And then when you have the chance to educate someone, educate them, take them through it with you, show them it's okay to fail. Hey, I failed on X, Y, and Z back in the day. It's okay because a lot of my guys right now that I work with will beat themselves up if they don't pass certain things that go on. And luckily, you have a great community of older people here and guys that have gone through it with them. Say, hey, man, it's all good. We're going to be all right. I actually messed that up back in the day. Shh, I'm telling you.
You have lived in so many countries, you've had so much travel under your belt. How has living abroad in different cultures influenced your views on fitness and resilience?
Let's start with dietary, right? So right now for your audience, I'm currently located in Europe. The food out here is incredible compared to the States. And we have great food in the States, but I lost 10 pounds, roughly 4.3 kilograms to the audience back home in probably about a month and a half of being out here, just eating everyday food in the local community I was in. There's no preservatives, there's no additives, there's no high fructose corn syrup. There's none of any bad crap that Americans put in their foods out here. So you can go eat pizza, pasta, bread, whatever it may be, whatever country you're in, your breakfast schnitzel if you're in Germany, your beans and toast if you're in the UK, right? But you can eat those things and actually feel good afterwards. Feel like you got a good, nutritious meal. Like, hey, I'm not craving another meal 30 minutes to an hour later. So I think that was the first thing. I think, two, I realized just how big America is. A lot of the countries in Europe really aren't that big, right? But you can fit, I think, 3 or 4 countries in Europe in the state of Texas alone, right? So that's a big example people don't realize. And I will say my opinions on capitalism have doubled down. I firmly believe in capitalism because you see how socialism or socialistic tendencies applied in economics out here actually crush people. Some countries here in Europe, you're paying 40, 50, 60% in income tax, and it keeps our people poor. So I think those would be big picture scenarios. I will say people are traditionally, I'd say, more chill out here in Europe as compared to the States. And I think sometimes the wild Florida man, as an example, is a great way to look at it. But unfortunately, a lot of Americans have misconceptions about the US. And they are fed a lot of propaganda that is false about the US, that every American is a crazy Florida man. No, actually, then they go to the US. Like I had my friends in the UK and London actually say, oh, we went to the US and you all aren't crazy like we thought. It's, yeah, we're normal people just like you. Like it's very different. There's also a blend of cultures, and Europe as a whole, from my experience, does not do well with diversification as well. So I think America actually does a lot better job of that than Europe does. But I do think they get to travel and see a lot than we do in America. Because, majority of Americans don't even own a passport and they go on holiday in their own country. And all my friends in London, they go to Spain. Spain is their Florida. So it's very different when you look at how much more well-traveled they are, how much more they know about the world. You can see there's also a lot of flaws missing in their society that America does really well in. And then same with American society, vice versa to Europe. So nowhere is perfect, but I firmly believe still in my whole heart that America is the greatest country in the world. We're not perfect. but we are the greatest, in my opinion.
How do you think the culture around living life a certain way and eating a certain way differentiates Europeans in terms of their view to fitness and strength as opposed to Americans?
I think they don't have as much sugar on everything. Let me tell you that to start. I really think Americans need to put down the sugar just as a collective. It is amazing how you'll even be out in a restaurant. Like, oh, no sugar. Their taste buds are not used to it because we grew up drinking Coca-Cola from God knows what age. And not the diet kind, like the actual big Coca-Cola, maybe even the little 2.5 liter bottles you can get at 7-Eleven or Walmart. So that's one way. I would say America as a whole, Europe as a whole, they are much more chill when it just comes to that everyday life. I think they have real deep, meaningful relationships because economics don't play as big of a factor for them. So it allows them to live in the moment and be present with other people. I was out in Italy recently and in this tiny town, and there's all these restaurants out there, and the people are having candlelit dinners. They barely have any money, but they're going out and these deep, meaningful conversations are happening over dinner. And it's not for 30, 40 minutes where you and I would go out to a restaurant in Texas, right? No, they're sitting there for 3 talking, catching up. How's life? Telling a joke here. The whole table's laughing. The kids are there. The dogs are in the restaurants. So I think they have much more deep, meaningful relationships as opposed to America where it's go money. And I'm really taking things to the extreme here, but it's just so your audience can understand it. That help answer your question?
As an entrepreneur, what are some challenges you have faced building up this business of yours?
I would say lead acquisition. I think that is the hardest place for a lot of entrepreneurs to start, especially in fitness. In America, less than 2% of people work out and pay for it, right? So how do you capture that market? So for me, it was understanding, okay, I have to define my market at the end of the day. And then I have to say, okay, who's my competitors in that space? And what are their rates? What are their offers? What are they trying to do? And then also, are they more credible than me? Do I need to go get certain degrees, certain training apps? Maybe they are delivering a training program in a certain way. Maybe they're just selling bigger packages over courses of time. And these are all real world lessons I've learned, right? I started off with Excel program. Now I'm using an app, right? I've started off doing $100 a month. And now I have different deals and packages to get more money and revenue. So getting money up and getting lead acquisition is the kind of the starting phase. Now we're in marketing, and that's something where I'm trying to be more specific with talking to people about Jiu-Jitsu or Judo or MMA. Those are a lot of the clients I work with. So how can I get those clients' attention? What is the big pain point that I can hit with them? In Jiu-Jitsu, as an example, a big thing I harp on is, hey man, how's your neck, low back, and shoulders and elbows feel? You'll start talking with them real quick. And sometimes it means you got to get on the mat and do the stuff. And that's fine. But those would be the big challenges I've had to overcome. I've had to learn along the way and fail forward, just like you have in your life, right? You build a company up and you don't do any market research, it's going to fail real quick. You don't have any clientele leads to pull from, it's going to fail real quick because leads are the lifeblood of any business organization. And then sales are what keep the lights on.
So for someone who's listening to this podcast and wanting to start fitness business, online coaching business, what advice would you give them to get started?
Define your product, define your offer. And then on top of that, go and train people for a lower price than what your competitors are asking. That's how you got to get started. When you do that, you then, if you don't have as good of a, let's put it this way. Let's say you have less years of experience. Okay, Mark's doing it for this price cost. So why should I do it with you? I'll tell you what, I'm going to do half the price and I'll over deliver on the product for you. You can start there. And if you're charging $100 a month and I charge 30, you're probably more likely to go with me to start just from a pricing standpoint because I've slashed 70% off right there. Now, you don't stay there, right? You got to build up at some point, but definitely start low and then try to get a lot of clients under your belt and then take care of them. Follow up with them every day through the training app or through Zoom calls or through program check-ins, whatever that may be, and then ask for feedback and constantly redefine. And if it means you're spending an extra 4 hours a night after work doing it, you and I both know that's the time it takes to build up something from the ground up. And on top of that, if you are trying to start something up, make sure you have a day job, preferably 8 to 5, because then you have your controlled windows of, hey, I can do stuff before work. I maybe be able to do some stuff during lunch, depending on how your boss is. And then on top of that, I can definitely do stuff after work. And then if you are thinking about doing it and you're single, I think that's going to be a really good factor. I don't think people who are in relationships that need to give that time, effort, and attention to the children are really going to have their whole heart in. So it's better to actually do it while you're single, especially for your younger audience that is listening, as opposed to having a girlfriend, wife, kids, etc.
Kosta, your life is a testament to resilience. It's a testament to overcoming barriers. And I'm so happy that I've met you because in a world of chaos where there's every fitness influencer telling all the crazy things to be able to just get views, you are out there spreading the right information with research-based knowledge that you are not only applying in your personal life, but also helping people in your profession and clients. So it's an honor and a privilege meeting you. What are some last words you have for audience members?
I think the biggest thing is if you have something in life that you are super passionate about and can make money off it, dive in head first. Don't wait. Don't say I'll do it tomorrow. Don't say I'll do it the next week, the next year, when I have enough money, when I get this degree. Start today. You start today, it's compounding effect, right? And on top of that, if you're scared to do something, jump immediately. I was so scared to go compete in jiu-jitsu when I first started. And I thought, man, what if I let all these coaches down? And guess what? I got beat 12-0 and got submitted my first match ever. But the next match I went in, and guess what? I performed okay. Then the next time I went to competition, I won. Take the time to fail, reflect, and move forward, right? It's the same as when you're talking to a girl for the first time. You're probably going to mess up. It's okay, dude, right? But then you go and you learn, hey, man, maybe I should posture this way, say this one thing, right? But it takes time, effort, and failure. The other thing I would say is stay in shape. Don't ever let that get out of your sight because everything starts with your body, then it goes to your mind, then it goes to your actions, and then your words, right? So start with your body and work outward.
Thank you so much, Costa. It was a pleasure talking to you. I hope to talk to you soon again.
Likewise, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.